So I got into advocacy kind of by accident, which I would say is probably how most people get into advocacy. Many years ago, my daughter was struggling in school. She didn't want to go to school. She didn't like school. And I could tell that she was having a really difficult time reading. I actually noticed these reading challenges all the way back in kindergarten. I didn't know how to explain adequately to teachers that my daughter was struggling with reading, because what they saw in the classroom was a very outgoing, self-confident child. Fast forward to the middle of second grade, and my daughter was emotionally falling apart. She absolutely hated school, to the point where we would pull up to school and they had a little drop-off line, and the kids would, the minivan door opens and the kids run out, and she would jump in the back of the minivan in the trunk. So I knew that something was going on, and I would sit and read with her at nighttime, and the only book that she could read was the book Madeline. And if you've read that book, her name is Madison, the book is Madeline, and a second grader can't easily read that book, but I read it to her so many times that she was able to remember it, and she would recite it to me, and she was always so proud to read that book to me. And I felt that there was something going on. I became obsessed with researching dyslexia. And as soon as I started researching the signs of dyslexia, I was convinced that she was dyslexic. I brought my concerns up to her teachers. I met so much pushback because she, at that time, was really unwilling to even do work in the classroom because she knew that she couldn't keep up with the other kids. And the teacher even pulled me aside and said, "I'm not supposed to say this, but I really think that she might benefit from medication." Red flag, by the way. Don't let staff at school say that to you. Don't let them just assume that a child with potential learning disabilities maybe just has ADHD, because guess what? Most people with dyslexia actually have ADHD, so they go hand in hand anyways. The school wasn't addressing the real problem, and the real problem was my daughter could not read. She did not have the building blocks to learn to read. So, as I said, I became obsessed. And when I mean obsessed, I mean like up till 3 o'clock in the morning researching how would I get her diagnosed for dyslexia? What are the assessments that are used? How do I get her an IEP? I stupidly thought just getting her an IEP meant that she would get the services that she would need to become a proficient reader. Wrong. But I went down a rabbit hole. I ultimately got her privately assessed. And when that happened, that really was a game changer. Those assessments came back, and that was hard data that I had to support the fact that she had a significant reading disability. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I blindly gave it to the school. I asked them for an IEP meeting. They probably behind the scenes looked at the testing and thought, holy moly, this kid has significant dyslexia. Let's meet with this mom. Let's give this kid an IEP and call it a day, which is exactly what happened. I thought I hit it out of the park. I went to the IEP meeting. Everyone there sat around the table. They heard me. They saw the testing. They said, we agree with the testing. They didn't say she has dyslexia, right? Schools are never going to admit that because then they're on the hook for remediating it. But they agreed to accept my testing. They agreed to provide her with an IEP, and they agreed to provide her with pull-out replacement English language arts. I got up from the table, I kid you not, and hugged every person in that room. I literally thought, this was it. I did it. I got my daughter an IEP. She's now going to learn to read. Boy, was I wrong. I couldn't have been more disillusioned at the process. I couldn't have been more at a disadvantage about how the IEP process works, how instruction in school works. I just thought because my daughter has dyslexia, they were automatically going to provide her with the remediation that she needed to be a proficient reader. And for anyone with kids with dyslexia, that's like an Orton-Gillingham approach or a Wilson approach, multi-sensory instruction that's taught with fidelity, that's monitored, progress is monitored. I thought all that was going to happen. And the day I met with the teacher and I asked her, during back to school night, are you OG certified? And she was like, no. And I said, okay, well, how are you going to be teaching her reading? And she basically said, well, we just use the regular curriculum. I just kind of slow it down. And I was like, this doesn't sound right, but I'm going to let this play out a little bit. Fast forward, by the end of third grade, she was no further along with her reading than she was at the beginning of third grade. And she was becoming less confident. She was becoming more self-conscious. She was becoming more fearful of school. She hated going to school. She's a bright kid with an amazing level of emotional intelligence. She was outgoing. She made friends easily. She was that kid that could, get 15 other kids to come follow her and do something, silly on the playground. But in the classroom, she was melting into a student that it didn't match. That I realized that I had kind of messed up. I had trusted the school district to do the right thing, and they didn't. And I didn't understand that, and I didn't understand the process. I didn't understand that there's other things that they could have and should have been doing. And fast forward, 6 months later, she was placed at an out-of-district school for students with dyslexia, and she actually had moderate to severe dyslexia. The takeaway from all of this is that I truly feel like I wasted 2 years of my daughter's education, trusting the school. As I heard over and over again about how she was inattentive, about how she was lazy, about how she was manipulative, how she really could read, but she just didn't want to. I now know that kids who can do well academically do well. Kids don't want to look dumb. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look less than their peers. They'd rather act out and be the silly one or the one that's getting in trouble than the one that can't read. So I made it my mission from that point to help other people understand the special education process. And that's really the crux of what advocates do. We're not experts in the law. We're not attorneys. I didn't go to law school. There's not even a certification for advocacy. There's not a degree you can get for advocacy. But over the years, I have developed a system for myself and how I advocate for others. And I have a really strong knowledge of how evaluations are, how they work, how they're read, how they can help determine if progress is being made. And I have a way of communicating with clients and school districts to hopefully come to a collaborative way in working together, right? And for the best interest of the child. So thanks for listening. This was a long story. I could talk for hours about this. And fast forward, my daughter's going to be a senior next year. Still doesn't love school, but hey, not everyone has to love school. She's not headed to college, and we're okay with that too. There's lots to do out there that doesn't require a college degree. That is a video for another day. Thanks for listening.